Hi everyone, it's Thai again, and today I will make a lot of question, a story. Superstar mastermind. Okay, let's get start. There were two guys. Were there two guys? What was there? How many guys were there? Their names were Brooks and Brian. What was their name? Who were Brooks and Brian? Was their name Brooks and Brian? They wanted to become great wrestler. Who wanted to become great wrestler? Does they want to become great wrestler? Who does they want to become? What kind of wrestler does they want to become? So they both joined the Hulk Hogan School of Wrestling. Who joined the Hulk Hogan School of Wrestling? Did they both join the Hulk Hogan School of Wrestling? Where did they both join? What school did they both join? They both joined the Hulk Hogan School of what? Hogan, the famous wrestler. Who was the famous wrestler? Was Hulk Hogan the famous wrestler? Who was Hulk Hogan? What kind of wrestlers was Hulk Hogan? Hogan was the leader of the school. Who was the leader of the school? Was Hulk Hogan the leader of the school? Who was Hulk Hogan? Hulk Hogan was the leader of what? It was a gigantic school, a super large school. What was it? What was a gigantic school? Was it a gigantic school? What kind of school was it? It was gigantic. It was gigantic. This school had 578 students. What school or which school had 578 students? Does this school have 578 students? Who does this school have? How many students does this school have? Next. Brooks and Brian went to their first class. Who went to their first class? Did they go to their first class? Where did they go to? What kind of class did they go to? And they arrived early. Who arrived early? Did they arrive early? When did they arrive? They saw two groups of students in the class. Who saw two groups of students in the class? Did they see two groups of students in the class? What did they see? How many groups did they see? They saw two groups of who? Where did they see two groups of students? The first group had just 5 students. What had just 5 students? What kind of group has just 5 students? Does the first group have just 5 students? Who did the first group have? How many students does the first group have? And they were practicing in one corner of the room. Who were practicing in one corner of the room? Was they practicing in one corner of the room? What was they doing? Where was they practicing? They were practicing in one corner of what? These was high achieving students. Who was the high achieving student? Was it the high achieving students? Who was this? What kind of students was this? As they practiced together. Who practiced together? Did they practice together? Did they practice together? They also cheese each other. Yeah, good job, go, yeah! Who also cheese each other? Did they also cheese each other? Next. The members of the second groups were just standing around. Who were just standing around? The member of what were just standing around? The member of what kind of group were just standing around? Was the member of the second group just standing around? What was the member of the second group doing? As they stood around, they were also complaining about teacher, about the school, and about students. Who were also complaining about teacher? Was they also complaining about teacher? What was they doing? What was they also complaining about? Who was they also complaining about? Next, Bruce walked over to the first group and joined them. Who walked over to the first group? Did Bruce walk over to the first group? What did Bruce walk over to? What kind of group did Bruce walk over to? Brian walked over to the second group and joined them. Who walked over to the second group? Did Brian walk over to the second group? Did Brian walk over to the second group? What did Brian walk over to? What kind of group did Brian walk over to? Bruce practiced with the first group. Who practiced with the first group? Did Bruce practice with the first group? Who did Bruce practice with? What kind of group did Bruce practice? And Brian just listened to the second group. Who just listened to the second group? Did Brian just listen to the second group? What kind of group did Brian just listen to? Of course, eventually, the class began at another class. What began? Did class begin? Bruce socialized with high achievers. Who socialized with high achievers? Did Bruce socialize with high achievers? Who did Brooks socialize with? What kind of achievers? What kind of achievers did Brooks socialize with? Brian socialized with the whiner and complainers. Who socialized with the whiner and complainers? Did Brian socialize with whiner and complainers? Who did Brian socialize with? Next. Gradually each day, Brian felt a little more negative. How often did Brian feel a little more negative? Who felt a little more negative? Did Brian feel a little more negative? How did Brian feel? What kind of negative did Brian feel? And gradually each day Bruce feel a little more positive, a little more determined. How often did Bruce feel a little more negative, a little more positive? Who felt a little more positive? Did Bruce feel a little more positive? How did Bruce feel? What kind of positive did Bruce feel? Bruce rapidly improved. Who rapidly improved? Who rapidly improved? Did Bruce rapidly improve? How did Bruce improve? And soon went on to the intermediate class. Who went on to the intermediate class? Did Bruce go to the intermediate class? Where did Bruce go on to? What kind of class did Bruce go on to? Brian improved very slowly. Who improved very slowly? Who improved very slowly? Did Brian improve very slowly? How did Brian improve? And eventually, Brian started to complain and blame as well. Who started to complain? Who started to complain and blame as well? Did Brian start to complain and blame as well? What did Brian start to do? Bruce finally became the great wrestler. Who finally became the great wrestler? Who finally became a great wrestler? Did Bruce finally become a great wrestler? Who did Bruce finally become? What kind of wrestler did Bruce finally become? Why, Brian finally got sick of practicing and quitted. Who finally got sick of practicing? Did Brian get sick of practicing? Brian finally got sick of what? Yes. Finally, Brian quitted. Alright. That's what I want to say. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.